Hey folks, welcome to Books, the Universe, and Everything. My name is Ryan Boucher. I am your host today, and I'm from LTUE, Life, the Universe, and Everything, the sci-fi and fantasy conference that happens every year in February in Provo, Utah. I'm going to take that out so that I don't hear myself talking over myself, because that's going to be annoying. All right. It sounds like our audio is coming through fine, and we're here to talk about Starship Troopers by Robert A. Heinlein, a classic in sci-fi military fiction that has made its mark over the decades and decades that it's been out. I'm excited that everybody's here. This series is a book club where we pull from panelists and presenters at LTUE and get them on during the year. Every month on YouTube, and these will happen each month. Next month, we hope you join us again. We'll be doing Dungeon Crawler Carl next month is our book, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll just go back and forth between fantasy and sci-fi and just other random stuff, things that we'll be talking about at LTE. We'll talk about here. We hope that you like it. Please leave a comment. Please subscribe. Please do all that usual YouTube stuff that you're supposed to do that everybody else tells you to do. Okay, I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves real quick, and then we'll jump into the book. Let's start with Michael. You're in the top right, so you get to go first.
All right. I'm Michael Haspel. I write science fiction, fantasy. My big novel that's out is Graveyard Shift, about an immortal pharaoh battling a vampire conspiracy in modern day Miami. And I've written a lot of Mill SF specifically for Warhammer 40K, which owes a lot to Starship Troopers.
Just a little bit.
So, just a tiny bit.
Ethan, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Ethan Sproat. I am not a science fiction or fantasy author. I'm an academic. I am currently Director of Research Development at Utah Valley University, where I've also been a professor of English. I've been faculty advisor to the Science Fiction Club there, to the Warp and Weave, the student sci-fi SF journal. I've taught courses on science fiction lit, science fiction and ethics also. What else? I have a master's degree in science fiction studies from the University of Liverpool, and I'm a founding trustee of the nonprofit organization Utah SF Fellowship.
Awesome. Yeah, Ethan has been active at LTUE for a long time, and appreciate having him on here too. Is it SF now? Are we calling it SF instead of sci-fi? Marnie keeps telling me to do that too when I write stuff.
SF has been a trope since Heinlein.
Yeah,
so
that's true. I'm just saying
very appropriate.
I always write it out sci-fi. All I'm saying is that Marnie is if you come to LTE, Marnie is one of the trustees there, and she handles all of our program books, things, and everything. And all last year, as I was writing stuff out, every time I wrote sci-fi, she would correct me and put it back to SF instead of sci-fi.
Well, I would defer to Marnie in all things
at
Life University.
I should too.
Yeah.
All right, Jared, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, excited to be here. I'm author of 6 different books, which are really excited. It goes from everything from nonfiction to fantasy comedy, and includes some horror and some harder sci-fi, which I really love. I've written for other groups like Sports Illustrated for the 49ers and the Utah Jazz. I'm also a Twitch affiliate and podcaster, and I'm very fortunate. I feel very fortunate to have a couple of awards from 2 different presidents of the United States and the Utah State Governor for involvement in the community. LTUE happens to be one of the places that I love to contribute when I get the opportunity to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, Jared is big in our community, and our writing community in Utah owes a lot to some of the fun stuff that Jared does, and Jared knows how to put people together, which is really awesome. Okay, let's jump into this book. We're going to be here for the next entertaining you for the next 48 minutes, talking about one of the foundational books that has shaped a lot of gaming and other military fiction and even military ideas over the last, let me do the math real quick, 40, 60, 65 years. Okay, if you haven't read Starship Troopers, there are going to be spoilers here. I can't promise that we're going to keep them light spoilers, but I think that's well past the expiration date of spoilers
Right.
here. So,
I would like to know who in the chat was alive when this was published.
that would be interesting. Do you have anybody?
So yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think we're past spoilers.
Yep,
It's fine.
we're good.
Hey everyone! Gollum destroyed the ring because of his greed.
Oh no. Okay.
Didn't see that coming.
No, it's a surprise. All right, Starship Troopers is a 1959 military science fiction novel by Robert A. Heinlein that follows Johnny Rico, a young man from a wealthy family in Brazil who unexpectedly enlists in the mobile infantry, a futuristic armored military unit, amid the rising interstellar conflict with an insectoid alien species known as bugs. The story opens in the middle of a brutal raid with a different alien species, but then quickly rewinds to Rico's final year of high school, where he has a very stern teacher, Mr. Dubois, that teaches history and moral philosophy, a course that influences Rico's decision to join the military. That is not the only reason. He also has a crush on his classmate Carmen, and she, when he sees her joining up, he also joins up as well, along with his friend, his name is slipping me right now, but that's okay. Rico signs up for federal services against the wishes of his father, and that becomes important to the story as well. In basic training camp at Camp Arthur Curry, Rico is forged under harsh guidance of drill instructor Sergeant Zim, who becomes a symbol of discipline and excellence. Training is grueling, with brutal punishments and high dropout rates. Rico witnesses the unforgiving consequences of disobedience and cowardice among the recruits, including the flogging of a recruit and the hanging of a deserter. As the war escalates, especially after the arachnids bomb Buenos Aires, killing Rico's mother, Rico is deployed to the front lines, and he participates in several battles and is assigned to Razek's Roughnecks, an elite mobile infantry platoon commanded by the tough and noble Lieutenant Razek. Rico begins to mature and eventually earns himself a promotion. After Razek is killed, Rico reflects on the weight of leadership and that as well. He later pursues officer training and is surprised to discover that his once estranged father has also joined military service and is now a corporal. At OCS, Rico reconnects with Carmen briefly, who is now a ship pilot in the Navy. And
very bald.
And learns that their friend, it is Carl. I wrote it down later. Learns that their friend Carl is joined military intelligence and was killed earlier in the war. For his final test, Rico leads a combat mission to capture bug leaders, supported once again by Sergeant Zim, who has been promoted and is in active duty now. After completing the mission successfully, Rico graduates and takes command of his old unit, now renamed to Rico's Roughnecks, with his father serving as his platoon sergeant. So a lot of good themes of loyalty, service, family in this as we go through. Let's jump into it. We're going to focus as we go through on first the writing parts of it, and then we'll talk about some of the thematic themes, and maybe even, if we have time, dive into Heinlein's philosophies and stuff like that too. But let's start with some writing questions. So, is this one of the earliest uses of the trope that became so prevalent in the early 2000s and late 90s TV shows where they would start something off and then it would be like 72 hours earlier and immediately go to a flashback of something like that. This is a really early use of that kind of thing where you start right in the middle of it and then jump back several years in this case as a flashback and then start telling the story from there. How well does that work? We'll just start from the very beginning. How well does that work in this story? What do you think? Let's start with Michael.
Yeah. I think it works really, really well because he literally drops I think it's one of the best first lines out of any book. It's something along the lines of, I always get the shakes before I drop. And so you just plant in the reader all kinds of questions. What's a drop? Like, why are you getting the shakes? What's going on? Like immediately you're urged to keep reading. And then he just inundates you with a lot of stuff about the apes, and the powered suits and the snoopers and all this kind of slang that you don't know that he winds up explaining later. And one of the parts that I like in that first chapter is how he's just casually throwing away atomic weapons. he's just nuking stuff. Left.
I gotta get rid of these. I gotta get rid of that.
Yeah. And he's also very callous because, like, at one point he goes into what he thinks is a warehouse, but it could be a church. And then he just flames all the skinnies that he sees in front of him, and then bounces to the next thing and drops like a bomb that's yelling in their language, like, I'm a 30-second bomb, I'm a 29-second bomb. It was like really weird, but I think it's really cool. It drops you in, you know exactly what to expect from that point on. And then when he jumps back into high school, you're just like, wait, I want more of that. I want more of the drops and the Marines and all that kind of thing. Or the troopers. I'm gonna slip up and call them Space Marines like probably a million times here.
What do you think, Ethan? Does it do a good job setting the tone and leaving you wanting to come back to that?
Heinlein got a lot of that technique from Kipling, who Kipling wrote a lot of stories that took place in India, and he got tired of explaining every single cultural minutiae of India, and so he just sped straight ahead with just scene details and whatnot that you had to pick up as you went, and that on a reread you understood better a second time. And Heinlein's real genius was as a short story author, which we're going to talk about kind of the structure of the novel a bit, right? Like pacing and whatnot.
Yep.
And but you can see a lot of Heinlein's economy of form in that cold open. And I always thought that whenever a film adaptation gets made, the leaping of the suits would be such a great visual motif to as you're jumping in the suit, then you have Rico jumping back in memory. And anyway, I thought that would be cool.
That would be cool. Every time he just pushes off, and then it's what is that baseball movie that the perfect game? That is that
with
way,
Kevin
right?
Costner.
Yeah,
excellent movie, by the way.
Yeah, I like that idea. Just every leap, then leaping back. There's some good symmetry there.
Yeah. He leaps, remembers high school, lands, sights a temple on a hill, and nukes it. Right.
What do you think about the opening, Jared? How did it hit?
So, it's for me personally, growing up with more modern, recent books, it's my least favorite kind of opening. However, given the context, when the book was published back in '59, right, and we're talking good sci-fi, and you want to introduce people and get them hooked early, this opening works perfectly, especially for the audience it was going for initially. Now, it still works, don't get me wrong. It works for this book. It just personally, it's my least favorite thing. I hate when people do it. I hate when TV shows do it, where they're like, here's the hook, the bomb's about to explode. How did we get here? I don't love that. I do imagine what it would look like if the Lord of the Rings started with an orc battle in the middle of nowhere, and then suddenly it flashes back to, hey, let's go look at the hobbits walking through their village. You know, it would have been a very different looking book. So I don't think it necessarily works for all books. This book, it did very good. I do love the storytelling elements, the way that it reflects back and skips over certain things, and I think it does an excellent job going that way.
Awesome.
I think Jared makes an excellent comparison. Like authors today, if you want to write like a really compelling space combat, like space military book, like one of your comp titles should not be Starship Troopers. Just like if you're writing if you want to write a compelling, journey quest fantasy, one of your comp titles should not be Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of ways that the books, if they were published today, just wouldn't work. And I like, but if we look at Starship Trooper as like an artifact of when it came out, and also a progenitor of like so much that came after, it helps us better understand. Like, if you want to write excellent space military, like comp your book to like Soldier's Tale in Hyperion or something like that. Like, or I just listened to an awesome short story. Oh gosh, man, I swear, Michael, I just did this. To the Last. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like if you want like large ship battles in space that does not feel like, space broadsides, read that short story.
Awesome. That's a good point. This is a foundational book that a lot of books have grown out of. A lot of media has grown out of. We're going to talk about that too, for sure. Let's talk about the pacing, though. Ethan brought that up. Do you want to talk about how well do you think? Give it a good rating here, everybody. How well do you think Heinlein manages the pacing between the slow and the fast? In my opinion, and you can correct my opinion if you want, but there are a lot of lectures in this book.
Yes.
and
it
seems like, as I'm going through it, though, that most of the time that's okay. But there's a lot of times where he's trying to get a point across and it's somebody lecturing somebody else. Is that okay? Is that too much? What do you think? Give it a rating on it.
I think he goes, in some parts of the book, he goes a little bit too much, but it kind of makes sense for what Rico's trying to get through his head at the moment. But I would almost categorize this, and I've told other people about this. I go, the battles and the military like combat scenes are the least important parts of the book. The book is kind of a philosophy book disguised as Mil SF. So I think the point of the book are the lectures and not the battle scenes.
Well, especially since the lectures are right. The lectures are meant for us, the reader, more than it was for Rico, right? He's
Right.
the tool to get it into our brains. Okay, what it was like to walk through a park and get mugged. And he goes on that whole rant about how society wouldn't tolerate it now. People would get whipped and all these different things. You're like, oh, that was an interesting path to take. What's that have to do with battles? Nothing. Not really.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ethan? Does he do a good job with the pacing, or is it does it slow down for you?
Oh, absolutely not. He doesn't do a good job with pacing. This was Heinlein as he was making a pivot toward. Heinlein's interesting for a lot of reasons, but one of them is because he is both like a father of hard SF and also a father of social SF. Like social issues, speculative fiction, and you can see you can see the DNA of like his hard SF like short stories that kind of led to this, and then also you can see Stranger in a Strange Land came after this, and the philosophy in it, God love them. It's probably an apt visual metaphor that some of the most philosophical people in it are pointing with actual physical stumps of hands. You know,
Yes,
that's how subtle the points are. That's how, yeah.
Spot on.
There's not a lot of subtlety. You're right. And then Ethan, you bring up something else that I wanted to talk about. Let's go ahead and talk about it now real quick. This is an author who, in the course of just one book to the next, and I actually read that he was working on Stranger in a Strange Land before he wrote Starship Troopers, actually. But let's talk about Heinlein for a moment as a person. He served in the Navy himself. He has military service in World War II, and he was extremely liberal. In fact, Asimov described him as a friend one time as a flaming liberal. I don't know if that was the first instance of that phrase or not, but he was. So he had, and the next book that he writes that comes out 2 years after this is some of the most softest, hippiest, true love. It embodies the whole philosophy of the 60s and kind of kicks it off, I think.
Yeah, it's very, very counterculture. Very
super counterculture. All about understanding people. Heinlein gives us the word grok in that book to completely understand and know something. How do you go from
Also waterbeds in Stranger in Strangeland.
Is that the first one?
Oh, really?
Yeah. The dude who tried to patent, I mean, internet, correct me if I'm wrong, but the dude who tried to patent waterbeds, U.S. courts were like, yeah, you can't do it because this author, Robert Heinlein, described it too detailed in Stranger in Strangeland.
Wow.
So he's also responsible for the bed that became known as the embodiment of the 60s and 70s too. There you go.
Oh yeah.
How does he go from this?
All the fluids.
How does he go from such a hard, like, this is very serious military stuff, and like Ethan said, there are people with stumps for hands who are talking about their military service as like they're glorifying it and saying this is not the greatest time of my life or whatever, but like it is very glorified and easy to read it as glorifying military force and violence and stuff like that. As an author or as a writer, is it hard to have people read your stuff and then think, oh, this is what this author believes, and they can't have other side of them or other thought? Do you think that is it easy to get locked into just people reading it and feeling like they know you now, but then there's such more to you? Like, it's just one book, right? And obviously Heinlein has a lot more to say than just what he's saying in this one book. Have you ever had an experience with that with any other authors or in your own writing? Have you written something and then thought, yeah, this is a good book, but I don't know if I hold all of these ideas that I put in here or not, but they needed to be in there for that book, or what? Does that make sense what I'm asking? I don't know if that.
Yeah. I had a small incident that kind of talks to that, where in one of my vampire stories, I have somebody talking about Shelley, but he is kind of a bigot and he's really old. So he doesn't talk about Mary Shelley. He talks about Pierce Shelley and his wife. That's the way he puts it.
Yeah.
And my editor at the time, my copy editor, kind of fixated on that and was like, no, Mary Shelley would be way more famous and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not believing that. That's not me. That's this character who's kind of a chauvinist jerk who's saying that on purpose to get a rise out of people. But I wound up changing it because it would cause, we were worried it would cause a lot of confusion and be attributed to me.
That's interesting. There are some good big themes in here that he does talk about that I think are super important, and he does hold and is trying to get across. Things like duty and sacrifice. And in fact, one of the central tenets of the book is that if you are not serving, in this case, the world, you should not even have the right to vote. If you haven't put in the service and the sacrifice to do something like that, then your suffrage is not as important to somebody who has. And it's interesting that it's not. We've based suffrage on a lot of things in our history, but I don't know that we've ever done it on service. And maybe he was trying to be a little controversial that way, and say that maybe people that know what sacrifice is like are the best suited to do that. And that's what he was trying to. Anyway, that's what's in the book. How well do you think that comes across? And what did you think about his messaging there? Let's start with Jared on this one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, well, what I love about it is that it's going counter, obviously, to what the way that the culture is going. As we know, at the time voting's coming up, we want more people to vote, types of thing. And then here he's like doing the counter. Hey, this is how it should be, only if you serve. And I think what it does is it does a great job of telling the reader, hey, I vote, as a reader, hey, I vote. Do I really consider all the details and facts when I make a decision as somebody who's put into that situation would? And I think it's to me personally, I feel like he's telling me, hey, if you're going to take this thing that's so lightly just given to you, you need to put a lot more thought behind your decisions when you decide to go out and vote and do things, because it's that big of a deal. People think it's nothing. And in reality, people throw it away all the time because not everybody votes, right? He kind of highlights that piece that, hey, the reason it's important is because if you serve, then you got the full picture. You're active. You're actually participating. You're aware of the way the world works, and more at least more of the world works. And I think, to me, it's speaking and saying, hey, you need to pay attention to a lot more stuff.
What do you think, Ethan? Is he saying that it's about the sacrifice and stuff, or is he saying that it's all about the military and the discipline? Like, what is it what is part of military service is it that qualifies somebody to vote? That Heinlein is saying qualifies somebody to vote.
Well, I mean, one of the heroes of the book, and what I mean by that, like the real heroes in this book are sergeants and maimed quasi-philosopher warriors, right?
That's true.
And one of those is the recruiting officer, recruiting sergeant, and he when he's trying to talk Juan and Carl out of Johnny and Carl, it's Juan. Johnny? Gosh,
yeah,
dang it.
It's Juan. It's Juan.
It's Juan.
Yeah.
It's
okay. So it's both. Got it.
it's Juan. It's Juan because he's from Brazil. The Johnny.
No, it's Juan because he's Filipino.
Oh, that's true. He's Filipino. His mother's Filipino.
Yeah,
his dad yeah, that's right. He is cross.
They live in Brazil.
He is cross national. He's a good example of a cross national character too. So. And that comes up.
Oh gosh. Okay. Like there's a few different rabbit holes here, but
Sorry.
No, it's all right. But the recruiter trying to talk Johnny and Carl out of joining up, and he's like, you think you want to be a pilot or engineers, whatever, but really, I mean, odds are just as likely that you're just going to be, a lab rat to test some like unknown diseases on, or some sort of awfulness. And so I don't know that everything else I've read about Heinlein would equate being a franchise voter with that level of bodily sacrifice. Like Heinlein also wrote uh, I forget if it was before or after this, that women should be the only like national leaders because they have. He said it more delicately than this. That they have like uteruses or whatever. Like like they have ability to have kids, and that sort of like man, these are almost like reductive ways. I think Heinlein's ideas are better when you're at a bar with friends and you just read some cool short stories in your like you spent part of your beer money on on a science fiction magazine and you read some cool ideas in there and you're talking with friends at a bar. I think that sort of like that social utility of Heinlein's ideas kind of work a lot better rather than uh, like trying to like draw out a lot of
Yeah.
like consistency to his thought because this is a guy that he contributed to the political campaigns of Upton Sinclair earlier in life and Barry Goldwater later in life. Like
Yeah.
that's very very different. Like
Yeah.
I don't know that
Yeah.
you can hold Heinlein to. He's an idea man for sure, and I think that the nuggets of ideas are a lot more valuable than like trying to like pin them down to or even like the like how well the ideas work
Yeah.
kind of you know
Mhm.
stretched out.
Michael, could you expand on that?
Yeah.
Because I think I asked a question in our prep and stuff like that about whether or not this is a story or if it's a bunch of vignettes that that are ideas that he wanted to write about for a specific
Yeah.
chapter or something. What do you think
I,
about that?
I think
How
it's
does
a
that work?
bunch of it's a bunch of vignettes for sure. And they cover I think the book, a lot of folks think it's about fascism. It's definitely authoritarian for sure. I don't necessarily think it's about fascism, but when he talks about the whole service thing, I think he's talking about accountability. I think that's the biggest theme of the book is accountability and responsibility and what your duty is. And that's what separates in his world the citizen from what he tends to think of as the civilian, right? That's kind of the opposite of the civilian of the citizen in his world is the civilian, and it's not necessarily detrimental to be a civilian because we know that Rico's father is actually a really successful businessman and has no desire to seek citizenship. He kind of thinks it's a waste of time. Um, and one of the things in the book, it's sort of implied, but I couldn't find exactly where that service didn't just mean military service. Later on, it does mean military service, but that's after the war has progressed quite a bit. So I think there might have been a different way to do like quote unquote federal service
Yeah,
without joining the
yeah.
military.
My prep took me across a couple of different options for stuff to serve in. Is what he earlier in the book talks about, and then yeah,
And he
later.
really covers that when he's talking about, I think it's in the vignette where he's talking about training the puppy and the juvenile delinquents, and he's talking about what somebody's duty is and all that, but it's almost antithetical to a lot of the messaging we've been getting in, say, like the last decade, where he's talking about a meritocracy, he's talking about responsibility to do duty, and he has a whole vignette about how juvenile delinquent is an oxymoron because juveniles can't take responsibility for not knowing that they're delinquent in their duties.
Right.
So I found that very interesting. The other point that I find interesting in his thing is that while you're doing the military service, you're not allowed to vote. So you have to complete it. You have to like earn the right to vote. Which is interesting. It's like I don't think it should be that way, but in his view, that's like you don't get it when you sign up to be in the military. You
Right.
have to complete your tour before you even get it.
I like that he reflects on that during the one of the drops where he's like, we don't get the vote to drop, but dropping is voting. Like we're making the decision. I really like that.
Yeah, and he also says something about how every MI is a volunteer. So if you don't want to be there, you can literally just quit.
Yeah. Yeah. And quitting is generally without shame. In that, I don't think that anybody looks bad on that. What they look down on, and the most gruesome parts of the book that I mentioned, the flogging and the hanging that happens and stuff, are people that leave their duty or don't understand their what they're doing or not being seeing that. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of philosophy in this book, and you'll find it in every chapter and stuff. Let's talk about some of the writing again. There are several moments that are meant to be kind of touching moments, thinking about like when he gets his bars before he goes out, and there's and they're from, and who those bars are from and stuff like that. Do those moments land? Does he do a good job having those moments mean something to the characters that they're happening to? What do you think? There's also stuff with his dad, and then stuff with his sergeant and stuff like that. How well did he do with that? What do you think? What do you think, Jared?
I think once again it comes down to context and era. I do think for the audience that was reading it back in '59 when it came out, those moments landed much harder because they were, coming out of those the Korean War, the Vietnam War, like everything's coming out like in this window of time. So talking about your dad volunteering for the military, talking about losing loved ones would have hit differently than it hits today, than it hits a reader right now. So I do think, like for his era, what he was trying to accomplish did a great job for the group that reads. Now, as breaking down writing as a whole, it feels like interjected super quick. There's not like a great setup for it and not a great reflection afterwards. It was this moment happened and now we move on. So I think they're not terrible. I think they could have been written a little bit better. Now that's somebody who's not at the same writing level. So sure. I'm just saying I do think that they don't hit quite as well as they do today.
What do you think, Ethan? Were there any that landed for you particularly, or?
I think your experience with the empathic moments. I mean, not. I mean, like. Anyway,
we're gonna get to that in a minute too.
Sorry, I didn't mean that, but you know the character moments. If you view every sergeant as a stand-in for Rico's dad, and then his dad literally becomes a sergeant, and so the book is the commandant and Dubois even. I mean, Dubois is a colonel, but you know what I mean, right? You know the like all these
father figures.
All these strong personalities that are not very different. Like there is Dad's personality, and then there is Zim, Jelly, Dubois, Commandant. Like there's a box that is all of the rest of them, and it's and the reveal at the end where and that sergeant's name was Zim. That hit me as an 11-year-old when I read this, and then when I reread it this last week, I was like, wah wah. Like it just what hit a lot. What hit a lot more was the craziness of having a father and son serve in the same combat unit. That you know, like we learned nothing from the Sullivan brothers in World War II. But that moment at the end, that full reconciliation, where he and his dad are partaking of the same sacrament. Sorry, I get that from like early in the book where everyone, whether you're Muslim, Jewish, Christian, agnostic, whatever, you kneel in front of the same chaplain who is a death machine like you, and then but the pathos of it is it works in that moment, and it doesn't really work in any of the rest for me.
Okay. It is interesting to read it from two different points of my life. I read it first when I was just out of my teens, and then reread it again this month. And you're right, there's a lot that hits a lot different when you're older and see it. What do you think, Michael? Any parts of the book that really hit for you?
The part of the book that really hit for me was when the one recruit, or the boot, gets court-martialed, and he has to have the lashes, and you're like, wow, that guy just got railroaded, right? But then immediately afterwards, the captain blames Zim for all that going down, and he's just like, if that guy hadn't said that in front of me, I wouldn't have had to do. He put him in an impossible position, and he's blaming Zim, and is like, how did you let this happen? And Zim doesn't argue with him. He's just like, you're right. This is on me. This is my bad. That boot paid for it, but it was my responsibility. He shouldn't have even had the opportunity to take a swing at. So I thought that was pretty cool. It resounded. I thought it. I'm not using the right word right now, but it resonated with me quite well. So that was pretty cool.
I love how that connects with. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I love how that connects with later when he's in OCS, and they're talking about how you might have been the last one to drop in, but if you're leading this group and they failed, you're responsible.
Yeah.
And you need to understand where your responsibility lies.
Yeah, I like that. The theme of leadership is especially strong in this, I think, and I can appreciate what he's getting across there. I like that moment too, Mike. There is one interesting thing that seems like it's tacked on at the end. How would you have done it better? In the end, in the last chapter, we suddenly find out, and I guess it is foreshadowed a little bit, but I totally missed it reading through, and then I went back and like, oh yeah, they do mention this. But there's all of a sudden, it feels like to me, and all of a sudden, there are people with psychic abilities that can suddenly see where the bug leader is, or talk to them mentally and stuff like that. How would you, as a writer, have done that or introduced that element to this story, or would you have left it out completely? What do you think? What do you think, Ethan? What would you do? Oh, you're muted.
You're muted. Josh, yeah. No,
you weren't expecting me to jump to you, huh?
Because the writers should take the lead on this.
Oh, okay. All right, Michael, how would you do it?
I would have introduced another character, maybe at boot camp, who, when they're going through boot camp, they all have to take this weird exam that they don't know what it's for. And then all of a sudden, this other character has been removed, and he's now reassigned to a different unit. And you wouldn't know exactly what that's for, but basically, if you talked about what kind of tests they were taking, you could infer, oh, this is some kind of ESP test, and that this guy had the talent and nobody else did, and so he got reassigned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that would have been excellent, especially if you took that same character and he was the one at the end walking around outside.
Yes, yeah.
And you're like, oh, I recognize you from boot camp. He's like, hey, leave me alone. I'm doing my thing. And he's like, what happened? And he's talking to the assistant, and they explain to him, listen, remember that test? This is how it turns out. So just take his word for it. This is how this moves forward. I would love to see that more as a foreshadowing effect, as a giving us a little bite at the apple before we get to the end there. Of course, casted Neil Patrick Harris as a character.
So Jared's referencing the movie that came out. Let's talk about let's talk about the influence that Starship Troopers has had beyond its own media. I think that the best adaptation was actually a cartoon that was on
Roughnecks.
The Roughnecks cartoon that was on in the early 2000s that I watched religiously, and actually made me late for class sometimes in college. But there's also a new adaptation coming out, but there was also a movie was made, 3 movies apparently, although I haven't seen the other two sequels.
Sorry,
to video.
there's Aliens, and what are the other ones?
So far, I don't know that we have a great movie adaptation of this, but we, like Ethan just said, this has inspired
Yes.
so many different things. What are some of the things that you see? What are some of the media that are your favorites that have come that have been born out of this? What do you think? Let's start with Ethan on this one. How about that? And you can talk about Aliens if you want.
Aliens, Ender's Game, those two. Aliens. Where I think James Cameron was very consciously making a Vietnam movie, and I think it's significant that that one of the things that Heinlein foretold in this book was the mode of warfare that would prevail just a few years later during the Vietnam War, where you have small groups of technologically advanced soldiers like being dropped into a place, burning civilian infrastructure, and then getting on their ship and going away again. And having that be part of Heinlein was clever in seeing the Korean War as being a preface to all of the brush fire wars that would be typical of the Cold War. Korean War was more than a brush fire war. My grandfather served over there in the First Division on the ground. It was horrible, anyway, Aliens, Vietnam. I think Vietnam is the historical event that kind of connects Starship Troopers to Aliens, and then we get Aliens. We get the unit as the platoon as it appears in Aliens because of Vietnam and Starship Troopers, and then Ender's Game, the Formix, the idea that individual soldiers are fingernails, and the real individuals are brains and queens and stuff. That like you read that in Card now, and it's like, oh, that's totally Heinlein.
Yep. What do you think, Jared? What are some of your favorite things that have been influenced by this book?
Yeah, no, I mean, Aliens is one of my all-time favorites, but one more recent, Edge of Tomorrow, I feel has a lot of that flavor to it, right? Where they've got the exoskeletons now, they've got large weapons that fire off their exoskeleton. Don't not H-bombs, which I'm glad they don't, but and the bugs that they're fighting in that feel very not super dissimilar than what Heinlein's really bringing to us. I feel like this is kind of like an updated version of it, and so that's why I'm so eager to see the remake that they want to do of Starship Trooper. That's supposed to be closer to the book. I'm very curious with this technology, with what we have now. I think they could visually do a lot. Hopefully they don't kill it, but that's one of the things. But all the video games that have come to us fighting any sort of bugs, even in there was this wonderful Star Trek game, I forget the name of the game, the specific one, where you're fighting bugs. You go through this whole thing with phasers and things, and I'm like, wow, this is super similar. Trying to go in. Do I go into the tunnels? Do I not go into the tunnels? Do I stay on the ship? What the heck do I do now? So there's a lot of pop culture that's definitely sprung up out of this, and those are some of my favorites.
That's awesome. Mike, I believe you owe Robert a couple bucks for some of your things that you've been able to do.
For sure. Ethan looks like he has something to say.
Oh, yeah.
Though.
Well, there's a short story that Michael wrote that was you titled it after Nietzsche's love of fate.
Oh, Amor Fati.
Yeah, right, yeah. Anyway, and so I was like, oh yeah, there's a 40K short story that there's like a nod to philosophy there and whatnot. Anyway, sorry, Michael, this Your moment, please go.
Yeah, it's like, well, StarCraft, powered armor. I think he's the one that brought that to the forefront. And so you got powered armor in StarCraft, you've got it all over the place. And of course, the Adeptus Astartes and Warhammer 40K would not exist without Starship Troopers. When he's describing the drops, I mean, that they have drop pods in Warhammer 40K. They have they unit chaplains. They do a different thing, but you can definitely see where the DNA, you know, where the creators of Warhammer 40K, when they were influenced by different things, you know, mostly Dune and Starship Troopers. And it's like, but you can see where it came from. And then of course Helldivers too. But that takes more inspiration from the Verhoeven film, but still, it's really Starship Troopers, and a little bit of Haber. What is his name? Oh my gosh, Fred Saberhagen, the Berserker series. A little bit of that too.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that made me think of the Quake 2. The first time you drop it in a drop pod, it made me kind of think of that a little bit too.
yeah.
Yeah, so many games that are video games and board games, Warhammer, Halo, things that would not exist without this idea of the armored trooper and this. And Jared mentioned the Edge of Tomorrow. I mean, even the main character in that is having to learn ideas of loyalty and bravery and overcoming his cowardice and accountability and stuff like that throughout all of this. That's even has similar themes, and then slaps power armor on him and has him fight these crazy aliens that are hive mind kind of things. Yeah. So
Bill Paxton playing very different characters.
Yeah,
Aliens
exactly.
Wow.
Yes, very different.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Aliens like even uses some of the exact same. They're talking about bug hunts. You know how many combat drops. They're using specific language that comes like right from the book.
So if you were to put Bill Paxton into Starship Troopers 2027, what character would he play? Which of the sergeants or something or do you cast him as Rico's dad and make it really extremely different? Where would you put Paxton at? Where would he fit?
After seeing him in the Edge of Tomorrow, I think I would put him into like a Zim type of role. I would like to see him like really shouting at people. I love his speech in Edge of Tomorrow. He's like, "This is the crucible that will, you know, teach us all. You know, everybody's equal here." You know, that was such a great speech. I could see him doing that kind of role.
Yeah. In Aliens, he's playing Rico, and in Edge of Tomorrow, he's playing Zim. That's true.
Yeah, in Aliens, I almost feel like he's the audience. He's the audience character who's just like, what are we doing here? This is insane. Let's get out. Let's leave. You know, we're done. How long are we gonna last? You know, he's asking all the questions the audience asks.
All right, so here's the last question for our audience, or for you guys to give to our audience. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you recommend this book, and why? Let's start with Ethan.
Yeah, definitely read it. Know where you came from, and know what you don't want to do now.
Yeah, awesome. What do you think, Jared?
Yeah, no, I definitely recommend reading it. I recommend, especially if you've seen the movie, read the book. It's so much better. It's much more informed, and it's got some really great ideas and details that I think anybody would enjoy.
Michael?
Yeah, 100%. And if you like the movie even a tiny bit, you should read the book because it's a million times better. The movie I hadn't realized how wrong the movie was until I reread it. And I was like, because I've read the book 3 or 4 times.
Tell us that story you were telling me before, though. What?
Oh, yes. So when the movie first came out in 97 or whatever, I was so gung-ho for this. And I had everyone in my unit. I was serving at the time in an ICBM missile squadron. So I had everyone in my unit that would listen to me read this book in preparation for the movie, and everybody adored it. And
No.
yeah, exactly. And then I was watching an interview with Paul Verhoeven, and he was talking about Starship Troopers. And he says, "Oh, I want it to be just like the propaganda films from World War II." So I'm thinking, this is going to be incredible. I cannot wait to see this. So we drove an hour and a half from Minot to Bismarck to go see it at the only theater that had surround sound. And I have all these guys from my unit with me. I'm hyped up. We're pumped. The movie starts and I went, "Oh, Paul Verhoeven's Dutch. He's talking about different propaganda movies." And it was quite. I caught a lot of flack on the way back for having dragged everybody to the movie.
Well,
Which
awesome.
I've come to enjoy now for what it is. It's not, I don't even view it as Starship Troopers now. I look at it more of as Imperial Guard against Tyranids and an adaptation of that.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Your insights and your commentary has been wonderful. I appreciate it very much. And everybody check the comments for where to find all these great folks. And they will, or not, check the comment, check the description. There'll be links in the description for where to find all these great folks and stuff. And check out the book. We hope you like it. Join us next month. We'll be doing, what did I say? Oh, Dungeon Crawler Carl.
Dungeon Crawler Carl, yeah.
And Lit RPG, and it'll be a hoot. So appreciate it. We'll get all that stuff up, and you'll see it on our Facebook pages and Instagram pages later. Appreciate you joining us this month, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.